September 1161. King Henry II sits down to sign a document that will change the moral landscape of England. Most historians focus on his wars or his castles. But on this day, Henry wasn't thinking about conquest. He was thinking about urban zoning. He was signing a charter that granted the Bishop of Winchester the legal right to license, regulate, and tax the prostitution industry. This wasn't a back alley deal. This was the birth of a corporation. For the next 400 years, the church wouldn't just turn a blind eye to sin, they would become the landlord of it. They created a liberty in Southwark, a legal gray zone where the City of London police had no power, and the bishop's word was law. To understand the common women of medieval London, you have to stop thinking of them as fairy tale characters or tragic victims in a novel. You need to think of them the way the bishop did, as municipal infrastructure. The church fathers were excellent logicians. They had a theory called the necessary evil. St. Augustine himself put it bluntly, if you expel prostitution from society, you will unsettle everything because of lust. The logic was cold, hard, and systemic. They believed that male lust was a biological inevitability, like waste produced by a body. If you didn't provide a toilet, the waste would spill into the streets. It would defile respectable virgins and wives. So the common women were designated as the city's human sewer system. They were the containment facility for male vice. But a containment facility needs rules, it needs management, and it needs a uniform. This is the story of the Prostitutes of Southwark. It is the story of how the Holy Church built the most efficient red light district in history, extracted millions in today's money from the bodies of the poor, and then, when the women died, refused to let them into heaven. The system was run according to the ordinances of Winchester. These weren't vague guidelines. They were 39 specific technical bylaws. If you were a woman working in the Prostitutes, your life was defined by these clauses. Regulation number 1, the ray hood. In medieval London, clothes were language. The bishop needed a way to ensure his workers were instantly identifiable. The law stated that common women must wear a hood of ray, a striped cloth. This was a visual barcode. It stripped away any chance of social mobility. If you wore the ray hood, you were public property. You couldn't hide. You couldn't pretend to be a merchant's wife to get a better price at the market. The stripe said, I am a sinner. Do not respect me. Regulation number 2, the single life. The church was a jealous pimp. The ordinances strictly forbade any stewholder from allowing a woman to have a paramour or a husband living with her. Why? It wasn't about morality. It was about economics. If a woman had a husband, that husband might try to protect her. He might try to take a cut of her earnings. He might try to move her out of the district. The bishop wanted a captive workforce with no competing loyalties. You belonged to the system or you didn't work. Regulation number 3, the rent trap. The women didn't own the brothels. They were independent contractors who rented rooms from the stew holders. The stew holders were essentially middle management. They leased the land from the bishop, built the houses, and charged the women rent. The ordinance set a maximum price for a room, 14 pence a week, 14 pence. That sounds low. But in the 14th century, a skilled laborer earned perhaps 3 pence a day. These women had to work 5 or 6 days just to pay for the right to a bed. Everything they earned after that was for food, clothing, and bribes. It was a spiral. The system was designed to keep them solvent enough to work, but too poor to leave. And then there was the inspection. Every Monday, the bishop's officers, the 8 stewardens, would march through Southwark. They weren't there to offer spiritual guidance. They were health inspectors. They checked the rooms. They checked the women for sickness of burning. And they checked the books. If a woman was found to be pregnant, evicted. If a woman was found to have a lover, fined. It was a machine, and the fuel was desperation. So what did this liberty actually look like? If you walked across London Bridge in 1350, you were leaving civilization, you were entering a Southwark. Southwark was the Las Vegas of the Middle Ages if Las Vegas was built on a swamp and smelled like an open grave. It wasn't just brothels, it was the entertainment district. This is where the bear baiting pits were. This is where the theaters would eventually be built. This is where the prisons, the Clink and the Marshalsea, rose up like stone teeth. The stews got their name from the fish ponds that used to be there, but also from the chew houses, the public bath houses. In theory, a bathhouse sounds nice. In practice, it was a damp, rotting timber building filled with steam and bacteria. The ordinances required the doors to face the river, not the street. Why? So clients could arrive by boat, unseen. The wary men, the water taxi drivers of London, were the unspoken partners in this trade. They ferried the apprentices, the merchants, and yes, the priests across the water. Imagine the smell. The Thames was the city's toilet. The tanneries in Southwark used urine to cure leather. The air was thick with smoke from the lime kilns. And in the middle of this sensory assault, you had the women. They weren't just working, they were surviving in a combat zone. The clientele wasn't romantic, it was violent. Drunken sailors from Genoa and Flanders who didn't speak English. Apprentices looking to prove their manhood. Violent criminals hiding from the city police. The women had to be tough. We have court records of common women carrying knives, fighting back against abusive clients, and forming gangs to protect their streets. They weren't passive victims. They were survivors in a system designed to grind them down. But the greatest danger wasn't a violent client, it was biology. The bishop's ordinances had a strict rule. No woman having the perilous infirmity of burning shall keep a house. They didn't have a name for syphilis or gonorrhea yet. They called it the burning, or more cynically, the Winchester Goose. If you got bitten by the goose, you entered the nightmare of medieval medicine. Remember, these people believed in humors. They thought disease was caused by an imbalance of fluids, too much heat, too much blood. So how do you cure a burning disease? You try to cool it down or draw it out. The treatment of choice was mercury. Mercury is a heavy metal. It is incredibly toxic. But to the medieval mind, it looked cool, silver, and pure. The surgeons would take a woman suffering from sores and rub mercury ointment directly into her open wounds, or they would put her in a sweating tub, a sealed box filled with steam and mercury vapor. The logic was that the patient needed to spit out the poison, and mercury makes you salivate. Excessive salivation is a symptom of mercury poisoning. So these women would sit in these boxes sweating, their gums bleeding, their teeth loosening, spitting pints of saliva into a bucket, believing, praying that the disease was leaving their body. It didn't work. The mercury attacked the nervous system. It caused tremors, what they called the quakes. It caused paranoia, madness, And while they were slowly dying of heavy metal poisoning, the bishop's rent collector was still knocking on the door every Monday. If you were too sick to work, you were evicted. And if you were evicted in Southwark, you became a street walker. And the life expectancy of a street walker was measured in months, not years. This brings us to the ultimate hypocrisy of the system. The church was happy to take the money. The Bishop of Winchester became one of the richest men in England, largely due to the rents from the estates. The whore's money built cathedrals. It paid for stained glass. It paid for the choir boys to sing praises to God. But under canon law, a person who lived in open sin could not be buried in consecrated ground. When a common woman died, whether from the Goose, from violence, or from mercury poisoning, she was denied the last rites. She was taken to a plot of land far back from the river, a dumping ground. It was called Crossbones. It was an unconsecrated pauper's pit. They didn't dig individual graves. They dug trenches. Bodies were piled one on top of the other. No headstones, no names, no records. The bishop's final technicality was this: I will profit from your body while it is warm, but I will discard your soul once it is cold. For centuries, Crossbones was forgotten. It was built over. It became a timber yard, then a fairground, then a garage. But in the 1990s, during construction for the London Underground, they started digging. They found them, thousands of skeletons. Forensic analysis revealed the truth of the system. Most of the skeletons were women aged 16 to 25. Their bones showed signs of syphilis. They showed signs of mercury poisoning. They showed signs of malnutrition. And they found something else: fetuses, tiny bones of unborn children, buried with their mothers, all thrown into the pit together. The estates were eventually closed by Henry VIII in 1546, not because he suddenly found morality, but because he wanted the church's money for himself. But the legacy of the liberty remains. Today, Crossbones is no longer a secret. It has been reclaimed by the people of Southwark. It is a garden of remembrance. The common women were erased from the history books. The official history talks about the kings and the bishops. But if you go to the iron gates on Red Cross Way, you will see the ribbons fluttering in the wind. The locals call them the outcast dead. We told this story to look at the machinery of history, to strip away the romance of the Middle Ages and see the gears turning underneath. It was a cruel system. It was an exploitative system. But it was a system that these women survived day after day, century after century. They were the infrastructure of the city. And finally, 800 years later, we are learning their names.